Are you having difficulties with transports? Getting stuck in a parking garage? Don't know where to lay down to gets? It's time to learn about how important them Ork Transports are. Today, we're going to go over the concepts of how this is supposed to be used, some demonstration and pictures of how I would place these models on the field. We're going to help you with deployment, disembarking, keeping these actual vehicles safe, and then also how to possibly use them for scoring or leapfrogging. So with that being said, let's get stuck in, lads. But of course, shout out to our sponsor, the Baron of Dice. Thank you for them to allow to do our paint competition. So check them out in the description for 5% off, because nobody loves taxes. And check them out because it helps a lot. And of course, check out Forge Fire Gaming as we're using them for this video. Through this, every terrain piece you're seeing this is Forge Fire Gaming. Check them out in the description as well. That's what I use. That's what we use competitively. So things to learn, just getting it started. So Ork trucks are cheap. We know that already, but there's more to Ork Transports than that. So we're going to be learning deployments because we go on places, staging safely, keeping the units that are actually embarked safe, even if you sometimes can't keep the transport itself safe. Disembarking, whether it's by force or by choice, right? Because sometimes we don't get a choice. And then leapfrogging, which is to improve your position by going past other people quickly or by missing out on some stages. But we're going to demonstrate what we mean by that with Orky Transports. And shout out to the Gits, Andrew Stone, whoa, for the $10 10 gifted membership stubs. Super supportive as always to you, Fancy Git, and to Murder Mouth 5 gifted WAAAGH Tactic memberships. Whoa, to you generous gifts. Also, we're releasing more videos in the memberships. So you guys who have been gifted them, check out our recent videos, and more are to come, and they're to keep improving. So these are the things we're going to learn today. Of course, my content is for beginners, intermediate, or them special gets as well. So I like to cover everything. Let's go over the transports very quickly. Of course, a truck is 12 places. Wagon is 22 to 12. Rigs are 11 or 21 if it's a hunter. Morks and Gorks are 12. Stomp is 22. Guard can be a 20 or 15. Keep in mind, something that's consistently messed up is that Storm Boys can, in fact, go inside wagons, Morkanauts, and Gorkanauts, and Stompas, and Gargantuan Squigoths. Storm Boys do not go inside trucks. They're the only transport that they're now simply excluded from, and rigs, of course. So you can do some pretty fun stuff there, and I will be demonstrating how they can be useful there, right? So in this demonstration, I'll be using GW Layout 2. It'll be Mission A, not that the mission really matters that much, but for your visual effects, just so you get to know. Oops, wrong tab right there. Now, we're going to start with the deployment. So just for a few key things, I need you gets that normally are just watching to actually observe the screen momentarily or as we do this, because I'm going to be demonstrating as this plays out and answering some questions. So the big red no-go zone, typically that's where we'll just call the firing zone, right? You'll see a bunch of Ghost Arks, or there'll be the Silent King or Space Marine, tank barrages held up in that corner. The red squares and the green squares are important to this, and will be more things on screen as we go through this. But the red squares are where the enemy can end up getting line of fire to you, if even where we have some of these vehicles staged that we have shown. The green squares are actually where, like you can see in the bottom left, where typically Ork players might be placing them. And we're going to talk about that as we continue to go forward and give demonstrations. Now, where I have my wagon and my two trucks is, in fact, where I would put my wagon and my two trucks if my truck only called for two wagons and two trucks on this layout. Of course, there's plenty of lists and other context as to where we would fill up this space. To start off, you can see that I have a green arrow pointing towards my Snickrot in that building. If I had commandos or Snickrot, this is where they would be going. That's why I don't typically have trucks there, because there's not really a great spot to hide them. So they're probably getting popped just like that one in the bottom screen is. Now, where I have these trucks that you can see on the top left is what we're going to call a safe get. And the safe get, the truck, is where maybe you'd have your knobs and your expensive unit you don't want to die. The centralized truck is where he's going to be act as somewhat like bait, but also placed in a safe spot where things, if he does get popped, can disembark. The wagon is centralized as a wagon always should be. Typically, your trucks will be put on the perimeter of a deployment zone if you can. Now let's start pointing out some things. One, at the top of the screen, you can see that that red square has gained line of sight to my battle wagon. That can typically happen. But if the enemy has overcommitted, that's where the truck at the top left of the screen should have a response unit to really punish the unit that really overcommitted to come down that lane to punishing damage onto your battle wagon. Keep in mind there is more to that, as this truck, the second red square that is going to our secondary centralized truck, can also gain line of sight if it goes further up enough and peeks that corner of that centralized terrain piece, so it can nip the wagon. Now, it does take some speed. This would be tipping point, so the enemy would be shooting out of their deployment zone to do these things. But that means if you go towards the middle, where if they are where that middle square is, then a wagon, whatever's inside the wagon, now has a perfectly staged unit to run out, jump, and saturate both the middle and the enemy's objective, which would be considered their natural expansion objective, right? Now, where I said earlier that green square at the bottom of the screen is typically not where I would put something. Maybe a kill rig if you think you can tank small amount of fire, but if you do place a truck where that along the middle lane at the bottom left, if you're behind the terrain piece, you typically have not enough movement to come out from there, and you've kind of thrown yourself too far back. And if you put yourself right on the line there, you might get shot down the lane. If you tuck yourself further back, the enemy can obviously still shoot you down from their bottom right, and that's subject to you if whatever you're placing there is durable enough. So it's an option, but not typically one I would use with a basic truck. If the enemy chooses to full commit, because this is a tipping point and they've run out past objective, was marked number 4, and they've now actually shot line of sight there, again, you should have response units, and we'll go over which ones they will be to punish them or now force the enemy to overcommit out of position. As we go forward, now you see a blue rectangle on screen. Typically, that could be a scoring, chaff, garbage unit that we'll demonstrate further on in this video what it'll end up doing. The green square that has now come up on screen could be your response unit that could punish those red units that have come up on screen. If you're Warhorde and you call a WAAAGH, those units might be already disembarked. That way you can go here we go on them and make up additional movement. The circular green spot that have now showed up on screen is typically something that could be as another, let's say a tank buster unit is what I'm going to call it now, as I'm going to demonstrate as we continue, is actually set up for that any unit that decides to come into the middle and overcommit, tank busters can now run out, get line of fight, fire and shoot, or they can choose to embark in that wagon. But we're going to show all these things as the video continues to go on. All the lessons we start from the beginning of this will continue on to the end of this video, and they are for you to keep in mind because I'm trying to answer more questions than give you questions, even though I'm sure you still have some. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if the enemy did disembark you, it's about putting and prioritizing your units into safe locations and what each unit does when it gets out. So let's say they popped that truck that we spoke about earlier that was somewhat centralized. You see the 5 unit of burner boys can disembark safely behind that terrain piece. That could be a 5-man unit of knobs, for example. They should be able to disembark safely. You see where I placed these boys, the big 20-man unit of boys that was inside the wagon. Keep the leaders and knobs together and out of line of sight wherever you're disembarking them. That should be the most important part of your disembarkation. You want to take advantage of those 3 inches that you got from disembarking. That's your spear tip. Now, the tank busters that I spoke about earlier are staged up where that prior green spot was. That's because if the enemy did overcommit, I was willing to either walk out and shoot them with my tank busters, or if I needed the leapfrog, they could jump into the wagon. There's still more context to that for that, but always be ready to respond. Now, if the enemy didn't get line of sight and pop everything, because most enemies aren't going to put themselves out of position to destroy multiple Ork transports on turn 1, and if they do, then you're pretty good in position to kind of charge into them if you followed some good staging steps, if you have infiltrators, you have fast units, and then a little bit of DACA as well. Now, let's say this is turn 2 and you moved up. Now, the wagon might have moved its tip forward, placed into the actual terrain piece. Again, that way if it gets blown up, those models can now disembark fully, not fully, but at least half that unit can disembark in that terrain piece and then tail out. You've also made space for that truck to now fit alongside and be a bit more centralized. And this couldn't even be turn 2. This could be if you just got first turn, right? Sorry, I misspoke earlier. And then your other truck stages up so it can actually line up on that wall. Maybe those 5 flashes got out before, so they can do a secondary, whatever it may be, or they can set up, as we'll show next, for them. As we talk about leapfrogging, we'll show how this units actually demonstrate scoring. Now, I do have randomly a buggy that I put on there. That's because I should have shown this earlier, but that buggy could hypothetically be a different kind of vehicle that you want to put there. Typically, this is more of like a speed elite army staging position. If you feel like you can, pivot, make it past there and stage up where that truck is. But that could have been a truck if you didn't like the other staging position, that it was more centralized to kind of bait. Say you didn't want to bait that line of fire because you didn't have anything that can reach out and charge it. Maybe it was too aggressive that they had. You could put the truck where that buggy is. And then now, like I said, you went first. You just pivoted the truck. The battle wagon, tipped it into the middle terrain piece, and then that buggy will now move up where that truck is. That's why I have a green arrow there. I have more trucks, but I let my friend borrow 3 of them for Adepticon, and I didn't get them back yet, so no problem. But I should have had them to make the video. So nonetheless, that where the buggy currently is still a moderately decent staging spot, as long as you keep in mind that you need speed and you need to be able to pop out through there. Yes, you can pop out through there because if you look at the GW layout, it's in blue and white lines, which means you can actually pass through there. So don't worry about that for your vehicles. I get that question all the time. So that's another way that you can safely stage. And this is all turn 1 as we're going through this. Now, oops. Let's say, and this is, I jumped ahead once, but it's okay. Now, let's say that a custodian unit made it into your battle wagon now that you're staged up. Now we're on turn 2. A custode unit with a blade champ and 5 wardens have just run up. They punched your wagon. They finished it off after the grav tank hurt a little bit. What are we seeing here on screen now? Well, one, when these are the units that have now disembarked, we're now avoiding the bad touch. What I have here is a 5-man unit of burner boys that was staged inside of this 10-man, this battle wagon with 10 knobs in it, right? So there's multiple ways that you can use wagons. Not all of them use 20 boys. Some of them have big killy bricks in them with a couple SWAT teams in them staging in the middle. Some of them go triple tank busters. Some of them go 2 tank busters and a flash kit. In this case, it was 10 knobs and 5 burner boys and a war boss, of course. So what I've done after they've popped this transport is I've disembarked 5 burner boys as close as possible to these wardens, and then I've kept the 10-man unit of knobs as far away as I could from the wardens. But keep in mind, the key here is to not let the models be the nearest model when they pile in, because it's a model by model basis. So you might think, oh, I put my burner boys there, it's close enough. If you allow your wagon to go any further, your war boss to be disembarked any closer, there's a chance that when everybody consolidates those 3 inches, they still touch your unit. And you can think, well, I'm not worried if they, if it's your south side of war, 4 inches, you can never be bad touched, is a good way to summarize that. Thank you, Brandon. And that's why you've created the space of roughly those green lines of 4 inches, and I'm luring the enemy in so that they can consolidate. This is something that's always happening to Ork players, where you disembark, you get your battle wagon blown up by an 8-bound unit, and then the unit ends up consolidating into one of your units. In this case, you might need to sacrifice one of your units to mitigate that, but it stops you from getting multi-bad touch in general. So a lot of Ork players forget this because you think, well, I don't mind if they touch me, I'm going to punch them. There's some units that can withstand your punches, that want to hold you in place and not let you have forward momentum up the field. Now, there's other ways that this can be done, as in if this is a truck. Now, in this case, an Ork truck has been charged because it was staged up. It couldn't be shot. So in this case, because how the rule is written when you are disembarked and how it's being blown up, I had 5 burner boys and then a 5-man unit of knobs with the boar boss in this truck. What I've done is the custodian player, being wise, said, I'm not going to allow you to disembark all your guys here. So I'm going to fill up at least half your truck space. Therefore, I've disembarked my burner boys first, because since it's all in the same phase in the activation, this is still allowed to where you can choose what's disembarking when. So these guys would disembark first as the truck's been blown up. And now, because they've disembarked and fill up the space where my knobs would go, and the custodes fill up all the other space, so I have no eligible space within 3 inches disembark. Now I must emergency disembark my knobs, which I again will do 6 inches away, keep them further away from the nearest custode model, and allow those guys to get out. That's why the burner boys are actually closer to that banner Vexilla boy. That way, then when they consolidate, they have to touch the burner boy, and they won't go towards the knob unit that has disembarked. So these are another way that you could try to keep these gets safe. And yeah, you might lose out on something, but always keep in mind the enemy consolidation once they pop your trucks or your wagons is a big deal. Now, the heroic gets. So lot of time, Ork players don't even consider heroic interventions, don't care for them because you think you're going to die. In this case, I've set up a heroic intervention for the Gits. So in the Gits case, it could be Ork boys, it could be Grots, it could be just something that you're eligible to die that the enemy hasn't shot and is staged up in the position. So here we have custodians who have come out of that centralized building on layout 2. They've come out, advanced, and they're roughly 7 inches, 8 inches away from that battle wagon. They're attempting a 7-inch charge. So it's about 7.5 inches where I have them placed here, about a 3-inch advance. And then, so it's still going to be a 7 attempt, but mind you, it's 7.5 inches to get there. Now I have these Gits set up, ready to go, whether they're going to keep moving forward or actually set up for heroic. And here's what they've done in heroic. So the custodian player has actually rolled just enough. We'll say just rolled a 7 or an 8, just enough so that he can actually get in combat. The custodian player rolled a 7 and was only able to get base to base with one of his models into my battle wagon, and the blade champ is still base to base with that one model as well, and the guy behind him is base to base, but the other 3 Gits are now left in the wind. I put a red line to delineate that these 3 guys are still going to be eligible to fight the wagon, but because I have heroically intervened with the Grots, now my Grots can actually force the backside 3 units to pile into them and not be eligible as contestants to fight the battle wagon. So in this case, I have mitigated how many of these guys can actually punch my transport, and I've used the Grots to soak them up. Now, Ork players do this all the time with boys. You can actually use Storm Boys, for example, and you can bring in a rapid ingress, and then they could be the guys who do a heroic intervention to try to stop some things. But it's always better if you just got some Gits that are close enough. And the more models you got better, the more you can just touch them up. And I rolled is just simply a 7-inch charge for these Grots as well, right? So if I rolled higher, I can even go further and take up more space. Of course, your Grots still get beat down. They're still dead. The whole point here is that those 3 back custodian wardens have to fight the Grots and can't fight the wagon because only the front model is base to base. Therefore, only the 2 models that are based with that front model are in combat, that are able to get into combat with that wagon, that are eligible to fight him. So the heroic dudes in the back are getting annihilated. They're dead, but you've just wasted it because the whole activation is happening at once. So 3 wardens are just fighting some stupid Grots, and your wagon is most likely now to survive this interaction. So as an Ork player, there are times where heroics are going to be interesting, especially if the enemy has very elite big bricks and you're going against another Ork player and you're trying to keep some of the units on the back tail end from getting all their attacks in. And this is used against us as well. So keep in mind, this is a good lesson for you as an Ork player to know. Now we're going to talk about the leapfrogging Gits. So in this case, we have still been in layout 1 and we're deployed in the middle with that battle wagon. In this case, we have a 10-man unit of Storm Boys because, like I said, they can go on a wagon. They're going to disembark 3, and then they're going to just charge up the field where the left arrow is right off our screen. But this 20-man unit of Ork Boys was actually deployed in the middle and more centralized, but actually in that terrain piece, touching that objective. That way they can sticky that objective, and they are actually all within range so that they can move or simply advance and get within embarking range of that wagon. That wagon, in return, can now move, stage itself up full of 20 dudes, and then the 10-man unit of Storm Boys can continue up the field with its advancing and charging. Note that Zodgrod can be placed in a dedicated transport specifically because the dedicated transport can adopt the scouting ability from the unit. Therefore, the truck can scout 9 inches and do this similar leapfrogging ability that we're talking about right now. So the scout truck will move up, Zod and the Gits will get out, and then another unit will come up behind him, run, and then jump in that truck itself, okay? And then that truck can then move again. So like I just showed here, let me go back one. Make sure, can I go back? Oops, wrong one here. But you can go back one and sorry guys. Here. Oh, I went up 2 videos earlier. So here, where I have the Storm Boys getting out and this 20-man unit getting in, this means because the wagon hasn't moved, just because dudes got in and out of it, doesn't mean it can't move anymore. Because it hasn't moved at all. Therefore, after the dudes disembark and a new set of gits embark, you can now move that transport. This is why it's called leapfrogging, because you're making up space and you're skipping what people would consider the steps here of, oh, I have to jump in and then the truck transport moves and then the next turn I'll disembark. Well, there's a case where you can simply allow whatever was in it to get out, move forward, and then you disembark with an alternative unit. That's what leapfrogging is. And like I said, and of course, Zod's unit, when they scout, you're not going to be able to disembark once you scout. But at the start of your movement phase, that unit that had scouted can disembark. Then a different unit can run up, jump into that same truck, and then that truck can also then again move. Okay. So it becomes a lot of moving shenanigans that most people aren't really utilizing, but it's something that I wanted to bring for the forefront so people were aware of. Then we have the lesson of every inch matters. So in this case, as I demonstrated earlier, and we're going to circle back around to the beginning slide so you can see how all of this goes together, is that truck that was staged up in the safe spot that I talked about earlier, moved up to the wall, right? Or you can even actually say in this case it was deployed. Actually, right there was actually a better place it would be deployed. But that's if nobody can gain line of fire to it, right? But let's say no one can actually shoot the wagon in this stage spot because they're not fast gets with crazy guns. That's cool. You have the truck deployed right up on that wall. Now what happens here is you will disembark something like a grot unit or a boys unit, and you'll disembark 3 inches, as I have the 3-inch widget there. So it's still in coherency. The units can all still fit there, the grot unit. And then I have another 6-inch widget there. You can see the grot can move 6 inches and just touch that objective. Now that means that grot can do a turn 1 cleanse. And then if you are listening to other tips and tricks from WAAAGH Tactics, you would have placed a Stormboy unit somewhere near the 12 of the center of the center objective as well. That way you can do a second cleanse and then get 5 points on turn 1, even though you drew cleanse. And then you simply wasted grots and Stormboys for 105 points, right? That's how you would pull that off. And that's 5 points of a secondary that's worth pulling. So you're using the disembark of 3 inches to allow whatever unit this is to disembark and get 3 more inches of its movement in its head, and then add its actual movement into that equation. So in this case, I'm getting the grots to move 9 inches without advancing so that I can do secondaries and just simply touch on that objective. There's other transports you would do this for, such as I said before, other ways you would do it for, such as when I pointed out with these Storm Boys. It's another unit that can do it. Now, if you're in tactical brigades, shout out to Stephen Pampering, where if you're getting some 2 units out at the same time, so if I'm getting a mech out and then the unit Storm Boys out and give them an order, in this case, this would be a great time that you'd want to leapfrog and then throw a 20-man unit on there. Plus, you've stickied that objective. So there's a lot of ways that you're getting just multi-use out of these units. Now, almost done there. And I think we're going in. You guys still following me? Now let me keep up with chat. Make sure I don't mix anything. What are you gets? Yeah. All right. Let me move this one up here. So I think orc players just a lot of the time think that I have to move up in stage and then die, like get all my stuff blown up. And in reality, you don't have to let everything die. But if you are to let something bad happen to your transports, like we're pointing out here at the beginning of the slide, there are cases, right, where that top left truck that we spoke about can just simply be staged up right on that terrain piece. If you're not willing to put something else there that's already on the table, like I spoke about with those little squares, where maybe it's a unit of boys, maybe it's a kind of unit that you want to get stuck in a fight early, a 5-man unit of flash kits, whatever it is. But typically, you can take that top truck, stage it up against that terrain piece, and then disembark the units to flood the field. You can take that secondary truck, stage it in that L-shaped terrain piece if you're willing to move it through and stage up next to that battle wagon. Let me show that in the other one. I had it over here. Got a lot of things open my gets. Oop, too much. I moved too far forward. There we go. As I said here, right? So if you just decided turn 1, this is a better staging, that's fine. Now, like I've said, this buggy that I have here should just be a truck, and I'm pointing out that it can simply take the place of that truck that's there, or in all, you can just start off a truck in the place of that buggy, and it will end up where that truck will be. And then the truck that has the 5 gits around it, they would be the truck that's staged up so that your scoring chaff could come out and touch objective number 5. And then the colored cards on the board, let me point that out, like I was saying here, would be if the enemy overcommitted and threw itself forward to gain a line of fire onto certain units that you staged up, right? So these first two cards that have arrows coming out of them are actually more to indicate what I would demonstrate as kind of like a bait maneuver, where the enemy has now thrown itself so far completely forward that when a 20-man unit of boys disembarks from this wagon, they can flood objective 5 and 1 and possibly tag both of those units that gain line of sight to fire. So if you're in a case that you have too many trucks, so you have 5 trucks, or you're in a place where the enemy's too fast and they're always going to get line of fire to you, well, then you dictate the terms of the line of fire. And if you're going to dictate those terms, then you're going to put the transport in a place that if they're going to get to it, you're going to be able to get to them, right? And then that's what I pointed out here. The third arrow that you see coming out from the big no-no circle going down to the green arrow, the green card at the bottom, that's where I typically see orc players placing their transports, and I don't typically advise it. If you go there, you're subject to being shot either directly down the lane across from you or being shot down the table across from you, getting popped, and then you have nowhere to go. If you are willing to be popped in that location or somewhere near there, it's best that you can disembark forward if they don't have enough guns to also pick up what's there. But that's a very risky maneuver. If the enemy moves up to this next card that you see that I'm pointing at, my own green card, to get line of fire to the wagon or the units that are inside, that's where then again they are quite committed and quite centralized to the middle of the table, and they are now in a position to be wawed on. The blue rectangle, as I demonstrated earlier, just like I talked about with leapfrogging, could either be run up to jump onto objective 5, or they could be used to threaten that enemy that is in the top, the red card that is trying to gain line of fire to your wagon. They can end up being the unit that's problematic to them, whether it's a shooting unit or a fighting unit. If it's a shooting unit, then it's in the blue one. Well, then now you have 2 different targets where the enemy's overcommitted to pop a 65-point truck or to get some shots on a wagon, and then you can respond by picking up those units or running up and fighting them. So a lot of time with your orc transports, what you're trying to actually do is force the enemy to make bad choices. If you can't get everything how you want it, because sometimes we just have too many transports or because they're too fast to actually get us, well, then at that case, you're actually setting them up for you to actually get your offense put into them, and which is what we really want to do as orc players, right? So with that being said, that's the importance of orc transports. Now, there's little tidbits in here and there that I might have forgot. So, of course, be sure to say those in the comments. Give me some criticisms. If I did good, thumbs up. If I did bad, go ahead and give me a thumbs down. I'll take that on the chin as well because I got them teeth to grow back. So, with that being said, hopefully this was more visual, more helpful to any of you newer or intermediate gets as to where you would place these units under certain conditions. And if you would like to see more content like this, let me know. If I can improve on it, let me know how I can do that as well. And with that being said, be on the lookout for more of our videos and more of our membership videos that are to be improving and greatly improve your orky nature. Now, there's only one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall because we not get teeth out. Whoa!